I think that's all I want to say about general stuff. So we're going to pick up on page 486 with question number 1. And unlike reading comprehension, because these passages are shorter, for sure, I can actually read the passages out loud, and rather than giving you time to read them or things like that. So, question 1. Life expectancy is the average age at death of the entire live-born population. In the middle of the 19th century, the life expectancy in North America was 40 years, whereas now it is nearly 80 years. Thus, in those days, people must have been considered old at an age that we now consider the prime of life. Which of the following, if true, undermines the argument above? And so one of the things that is in your best interest to do is to summarize, paraphrase as briefly as possible what that argument is. And so ultimately the argument is that 40 must have seemed old. Back in the 19th century. Because they had a different life expectancy. 40 must have seemed old to them, whereas now to us it doesn't seem that old. So to undermine that, we need to weaken the idea that that was... well, in order for 40 to seem really old, you need not many people to have survived past 40, right? If lots of people survive past 40, 40 is not going to seem that old because, in the 19th century, which is the 1800s, you may know lots of people over 40, and therefore 40 isn't going to seem as old. So to undermine this argument, we need people to have lived longer, or about as long, in the 19th century. Let's take a look at the answer choices for something that does something like that. Choice A, in the middle of the 19th century, the population of North America was significantly smaller than it is today. So this is actually similar to what happens in some, data sufficiency questions, where there's a difference between actual numbers and ratios. Keep in mind that life expectancy, as defined in this passage, is itself a ratio. It's an average. It's an average of all the people's ages divided by all the people who were born living, and so the actual number of people in the average does not necessarily affect the rate at all. You could have 2 people with an average age of 40 and 2 million people with an average age of 40. So the actual population does not impact life expectancy and certainly does not give us anything to tell us that it doesn't give us a way of making 40 not a long life in the 19th century. So it's not A. B, most of the gains in life expectancy in the last 150 years have come from reductions in the number of infants who die in their first year of life. So this one is actually much better. What this does for us is it says that life expectancy in the 19th century would have been something like 0.5 plus 0.5 plus 0.5 plus. So sorry to deal in infant mortality so callously, but we have to move quickly on the GMAT. So these numbers represent children who die at very young ages due to various childhood diseases that were prevalent in the 19th century. So their average is weighted down by a lot of numbers that are close to 0, which then means that there can still be other numbers at the high end of life expectancy where people are living to be 80, 90, 100. Whereas we are now in the 21st century, our ages we'd still have some 0.5s. Sometimes children do die at very young ages, but then we have a more of a distribution. The numbers are spread out more evenly over that total population, which I suppose I should make a different variable because it would be a different number. Anyway, the point being that choice B gives us the option of still having people living to the same old age. That is to say, people could still live to be 80, 90, 100, but all those babies dying basically drove the average life expectancy to 40. Whereas now that infant mortality, number of infants who die in their first year of life, eradicating the causes of that raises the life expectancy quite a bit without changing the how old people are when old people die. So 40 would not have seemed old in the 19th century. It just meant you survived the very rough infant years. So choice B basically has to be the right one because it deals with affecting how those averages are computed without changing the range of the values. Maybe I should have said that initially. So basically, the range would be the same, which means that 80, 90, 100 still seems old. However, we do still need to look at how wrong answer choices are constructed, and so because that allows you to eliminate them more quickly. So choice C, many of the people who live to an advanced age today do so only because of medical technology that was unknown in the 19th century. So what this question is saying is that the only way that people live to be 100 is because of medical technology that they didn't have back then. This actually strengthens, I write 180 for, it's exactly the opposite of what we're after. This actually strengthens the argument that 40 would have seemed old to them. If nobody was able to live to 100 in the 19th century because they didn't have this medical technology, 40 would have seemed old. So this is definitely not the right answer. Choice D, the proportion of people who die in their 70s is significantly smaller today than is the proportion of people who die in their 80s. Well, if anything, this strengthens it again. It says that lots more people live to be 80 even than 70. And again, that strengthens the idea that if anything, it strengthens the idea that living to be that old is a modern thing. So it's not quite a 180, but it definitely kind of strengthens the argument that that oldness is a modern thing. And then choice E, more people in the middle of the 19th century engaged regularly in vigorous physical activity than do so today. Well, that may well be true, but without really knowing anything else about this doesn't tell us anything about life expectancy or, as a ratio or as an average, It doesn't tell us why 40 would have seemed old to them or why it wouldn't have seemed old to them despite the very different life expectancy. So choice E is basically kind of irrelevant to what's going on. So that leaves us with choice B as the correct answer. Still page 486. Question number 2. Scientists propose placing seismic stations on the floor of the Pacific Ocean to warn threatened coastal communities on the northwestern coast of the United States of approaching tidal waves caused by earthquakes. Since forewarned communities could take steps to evacuate, many of the injuries and deaths that would otherwise occur could be avoided if the government would implement this proposal. The answer to which of the following questions would be most important in determining whether implementing the proposal would be likely to achieve the desired result? Very wordy version of the question. Really what this is saying, the question, first let's paraphrase the question. Which of the following questions makes, the answers to which of these questions makes the plan more successful? Okay, and so the plan, and again we need to paraphrase that plan. The plan is that this forewarning system needs to give people enough time to evacuate. Okay, so and needs to reduce the loss of life and property damages. So that's the plan. We need something that gives people enough time to evacuate so those losses are lower. So the questions then, answer choice A, when was the last time that the coastal communities were threatened by an approaching tidal wave? So the frequency with which tidal waves occur, or when the most recent one was, does not impact the effectiveness of this plan. The plan, it doesn't matter when the last one was. It just matters whether once this seismic detector system is out there, does it give people enough time? So that clearly irrelevant. Choice B, how far below sea level would the stations be located? Again, while that's something that they would need to know in implementation of it, it does not impact the effectiveness of the plan. Very often, these questions are set up to attract your business-like minds out there. Those of you who are basically involved in any level of business administration, there are so many questions you need to ask to determine whether the feasibility of a plan. This question is not about feasibility. This is about whether it will actually do what it's supposed to do, no matter the cost, no matter the depth of the ocean. Choice C, would there be enough time after receiving warning of an approaching tidal wave for communities to evacuate safely? So again, this was the terms of the plan, that people need to be able to get out in time. So this is clearly the right answer. I'll also note that wrong answer choices are frequently based on time or money, because those are, of course, two of the key elements in most business decisions. Whether something will get done fast enough and whether it will be cost effective. So wrong answer choices frequently hinge on those things, and you can pick them out pretty easily. The times when they're correct, though, of course, are when the passage itself, the argument itself, the plan itself, like this one, hinges on coming under a certain dollar amount or being fitting in a certain time frame. So this particular one, clearly, time is the basis of the argument, but in many other cases, time is in fact the basis of a wrong answer choice. Anyway, let's continue. Choice D, how soon after a tidal wave hits land is it safe for evacuees to return to their communities? Again, this is beyond the scope of whether it gives people enough time to get away, but would still be useful to know when they actually implement it. Choice E, can the stations be equipped to collect and relay information about phenomena other than tidal waves caused by earthquakes? Potentially interesting, irrelevant to the specific nature of the plan as presented. So that leaves us only with answer choice C. C is the only one that deals with the actual question being asked. This is why it's so important to actually do that paraphrasing work of making sure you understand what the actual core of the argument is, so that you can eliminate answer choices that, again, in the real world would be relevant, but are not relevant to the question being asked. All right.